Oh, baby, it's that time of day. It's the Friday free-for-all mailbag, and I'm pumped. I'm fired up. It's Friday. Let's get this thing moving, Brian. But, of course, it wouldn't be a day at Irish Breakdown if we didn't have breaking news. And the breaking news for today is that Jason Ademilola is returning to Notre Dame for his 5th year. That would be step 2 of the 3-step process for Notre Dame to have an elite defensive line. I believe you do have an article about that over at irishbreakdown.com when Justin said he was coming back. So he was step 1, Jason step 2, and now Isaiah Foskey would be step 3, and that announcement will happen tomorrow. But huge news with Jason coming back.
Yeah, and we're not saying that Isaiah Foskey.
That's not what I was saying.
We're telling you that Isaiah Foskey is coming back. That's not what we're saying. We've heard some things that make us think that is an option, that he's definitely thinking about coming back. But I've also heard it from that it's not as as a done deal as maybe we thought. But if I had to wager, I would wager on Isaiah Foskey coming back. But again, as we've seen it work out for Notre Dame in the past, this is why you got to let it play out. You know what I mean? So thank you.
Welcome.
Because and I always say, always remember that the words on my shirt look slanted because of the way that I sit, not because like I have to tell my wife, like, is this shirt straight? Because the way I sit, I lean in one direction. So anyway,
that's funny.
That's what we're hearing. And of course, there's going to be some other things. Some guys have to emerge and break out. One thing we put on the message board yesterday is that we're hearing that Riley Mills is actually going to move to the big end position in 2022. So if you're a member of the message board, you'd have got that yesterday. Because he flashed a lot. He was third on the team and tied with fourth on the team in sacks, despite playing a lot fewer snaps than some of the other guys in the conversation. So this defensive line has a chance to be really, really good next year, even better than it was this year. And this year they had the most sacks by a defense. The Notre Dame defense had its most sacks since the 90s, and the defensive line had most of those sacks. So this has got a chance to be a really special defense. Moving forward, so it's going to be
exciting. Yeah, I will agree with the assessment that this defensive line could be better this year than it was last year, because the younger guys, the guys that the depth guys that were depth guys this year, but they've all gotten better and they're all coming back, except for obviously Myron, who is leaving, and he should. I mean, I think it's time. But I think the depth guys have all raised their game up, and it's going to pay dividends for this defensive line moving forward. And that's why, and I don't want to put words in Brian's mouth, but I think that's why the defensive line projects to be better in 22 than it was in 21.
That's it. I mean, I think that we have to remember this was Isaiah Foskey and Jason Ademiola's first year in the starting lineup.
Yeah, good point.
I mean, Isaiah Foskey had never been a regular before this year. His game is going to be better. I would like to see him be used more as a pass rusher and not as much in the dropping in the coverage. This was Jason Ademiola's first year as a starter.
Right.
These guys had always been rotation players. And then, we saw Jacob Lacey getting back to good health. We saw Howard Cross continue to emerge. We saw Alexander Ahrensberger become a rotation player for Notre Dame this year. He's only going to get better. So I think that's the exciting thing. And the other part of it, too, is, I mean, with the exception of the Ademiolas, everybody on the defensive line now, we do not anticipate Isaiah Foskey. We're just hoping he comes back for 2022. There's no illusions he's coming back for 2023.
No.
But every player coming back on the roster, with the exception of the Ademiolas, has additional eligibility beyond 2022.
Right. Yeah, good point.
So, and some of them multiple years of eligibility, because of red shirts and then the COVID year and things along those lines. So I think that I think that is true. Tommy Gunn's referring to Mick Assif is reported today that Isaiah Foskey is returning. I know it's not super reliable, but still, I'd like to say something about this. I don't know what Mick's trying to do, like if he's trying to get into like the journalism world or something like that. But how about you do what we all do, which is let these kids kind of have their moment, right? Like. Right. Because people are going to say, because he knows the players, that he's, that let's let them have their moment. And Tommy Guns then said he was first on Freeman. No, he wasn't. Irish Breakdown was, with all due respect. He was the first one that ran to Twitter and put it on Twitter.
Exactly.
But he's not the first person.
And there's a difference. There's a major difference. Yes. It is funny how many of these Twitter accounts have emerged over the last few weeks
with
that
all
are
their
breaking
sources.
News. Yeah,
yeah.
Like,
when you
guys.
read something I wrote, or Tim Priester wrote, or Tom Loy wrote,
Right.
or BGI wrote, that's not a source. That's you stealing information.
That's right. So at least retweet it,
or at least say, "Hey, I read
it
at IB, or I read it at 247, or But,
so many different times I've wanted to like respond.
Just
to
because
them,
you see it first on Twitter by someone doesn't mean it was done first by that person on Twitter.
Right.
It's one of the many reasons I hate Twitter.
There's so many things I hate. But that's up there.
We do have some questions though, Vince. Today,
you darn right we do.
Friday free for all mailbag. So let's
start with the couple of super chats that we got, and
I'll pull those up.
Okay, nailed it. All right. So from Matt, thank you, Matt, very much. He says, "What is your opinion on the idea of the quietness around the wide receiver coach position? Is it because Wiggins wants it quiet until after Monday's game?"
I guess I don't know what you mean by quietness, Matt. I mean, I don't know what you mean by that. It's not quiet. It's what we've reported at Irish Breakdown several days ago. There's basically two candidates that Marcus Freeman and Tommy Rees have in mind, and that is Holman Wiggins, who's the receivers coach at Alabama, and Jamarcus Shepard, who's the receivers coach at Purdue.
Right.
It's not quiet. It's just those are the candidates, and so
it's playing itself out. I mean, it takes time to narrow it down and do your due diligence and all of those things.
So I don't think it's a situation where it's he wants it quiet until after the game. I think it's a situation that they haven't necessarily, agreed to everything and done everything. All I can tell you is that I do know for a fact that Holman Wiggins, who is the wide receivers coach at Alabama, has been there. This is his third season. Was at Virginia Tech before that, Memphis before that. Is genuinely interested in the Notre Dame job. But being really interested and having thorough conversations is a whole lot different than saying, I'm going to turn down coaching the kids that I have at Alabama.
Yeah, you got it.
So we'll see how that plays out. But I think it right now, and barring a change in direction, it'll be one of those two coaches from what I've been told. So I don't know that it's quiet. It's just like it's not quiet on the offensive line. It's just there's nothing new to report. It's just they're working in a direction towards making the hire that they want to make. So I think if anything, I'd be more nervous if there was a lot of noise because we're hearing this candidate, that candidate,
right.
Because that would tell me that their top two candidates turned them down already.
Right. Yeah, absolutely.
So
let me ask you this question because it's been asked of me the last few days. And this is multi-layered because of that would be people's opinions of Notre Dame versus Alabama, et cetera. But people are asking me, why would the wide receivers coach from Alabama go to Notre Dame for a lateral move from a position standpoint, if not a step down? Because isn't he the assistant at offensive coordinator?
He would probably he's assistant head coach or something like that.
Yeah, something like that.
What people have to understand too is a lot of those, those things those are simply meant to give someone a pay raise.
Sure.
Like Justin Fry was the offensive coordinator at UCLA. Chip Kelly was the play caller at UCLA.
Sure.
Jamarcus Shepard is the co-offensive coordinator at Purdue. Does anybody think anyone other than Jeff Brom is running the offense at Purdue? Right? It's their titles meant to give people pay raises. And so it depends on the coach. I mean, there's a lot of reasons. One, Nick Saban's a really hard guy to work for. It just is. Number two, this doesn't get talked a lot about, but he has a lot of turnover on his staff.
He does.
You're a lot of turnover.
Yeah.
And it's not just the guys leaving for head coaching jobs. Those are the only ones that get discussed in the media, but because not a lot of people talk about assistant coaches.
Right.
He has a lot of assistant coach turnover at Alabama, especially the last 5-6 years. Number one, before Holman Wiggins went to Alabama, he was at Virginia Tech and Memphis. It's a different world at Alabama, and he may be successful, but just because you're successful at something doesn't mean you necessarily like it. He may be someone, and these are just me throwing out possibilities. He may be someone who actually cares about developing young people on and off the field, which is not an issue at Bama. It's just football, football, football. He may be someone that cares about the holistic approach to coaching, meaning, hey, I care about the academics. I care about developing young people from a cultural standpoint and from a character standpoint and from a mental standpoint off the field. And that's not really important at Alabama. It's develop football players. And it could be he wants to go work for Marcus Freeman. I mean, the only reason Brian Hartline is even considered coming to Notre Dame was because of Marcus Freeman.
100%. Yes.
And so those are things that you have to consider, that it's not always just about Bama versus Notre Dame. It's not. And the other thing, too, is let's be honest. If you're a person with ego, you're just the latest receivers coach to win a title at Bama. You go to Notre Dame and win a title, and you're a legend.
Yeah.
Right? So that's just the power of Notre Dame, right? Lou Holtz won one national title. One. It was his third year, and he won like a lot of seasons where he didn't win it.
Mm-hmm.
And yet he's a Hall of Famer. He's a legend. He's all those kind of things. Why? Because he did it at Notre Dame, and that's just the reality of it. You win a title at Notre Dame, and you're a legend. Eric Parsegian won 2 national titles, and he's a legend, right? Now, 2's a lot. I mean, but when you think about some of these other coaches that have won 5, 6, Nick won like 8 or 9, it's insane. But that's just the power of Notre Dame. And it's also about being different. It's kind of like, it just, and the other thing too is, not in Alabama, you're not dealing with Nick Saban, but you got to deal with Bill O'Brien. And I'm just going to tell you right now, I've had interactions with Bill O'Brien in the past during my coaching career, and he's not someone I'd want to work for or hang out with or be in the presence of ever. So I would imagine it's not a super fun working environment. And that matters because you're spending a lot more time with those guys than you are your players.
And with your family, for that matter. So, I mean, it's important. Your work-home life balance is so important when you're a coach that you at least have to enjoy your time when you're coaching in order to make it worthwhile. I mean, especially when you're a coach like Coach Wiggins who has options. That's important, so.
Right. Here's another super chat, and then we're going to get back to the top, Vince.
All right,
this is for you.
Oh, boy. John, thank you for the super chat. He says, hey, Vince, if Foskey comes back, would you give the Notre Dame D-line an A+? I don't give A+, John. I'm sorry. It's just not going to happen. And if I gave him an A+, it would be on projection. And I'm definitely not giving an A+ based on projection. Now, if they go out there and they just, go above and beyond and, set records and do all kinds of craziness, they'll be in the discussion for an
So
A+.
would you give Holman Wiggins an A+ for the job he's done coaching Alabama's receivers?
I have a hard time giving A+.
Guy, he coached a Heisman Trophy winner. They're going to win 2 titles in 3 years. See, now you're being stubborn in your A+.
I know. 100%.
Making yourself look bad, Vince.
The school I teach at, if you get 100%, it's still an A. It's not an A+.
Okay, but it's a South Bend public school.
Well, still.
That shouldn't be the standard bearer for how we run our education system, if we're being completely honest.
Ouch.
Yeah, I know you can't comment on that, but I can. So, yeah.
All right, back to the top. Scott has a fun one. He says, off topic, what Notre Dame career do you think Aaron Lynch would have had if he didn't transfer? He was a beast, and I was crushed when he transferred. Thanks for all your hard work bringing us this content.
Well, I kind of look at it like this, Scott, because it's a great question. I look at it and I'm going to frame it in the way that I would frame the Deshaun Kaiser discussion. People say, what kind of team would Notre Dame have been in 2017 if Deshaun Kaiser would have returned? And my premise has always been like, well, what version of Deshaun Kaiser are you getting? Are you getting the 2015, 2016 version, who is not a guy you'd want on your football team from a character and leadership standpoint or lack thereof? Or are you looking at it from a standpoint of what would have gone into him deciding to stay? What factors would have had to go into him deciding to stay? Meaning, hey, you're going to have the better attitude, you're going to be more of a team player, those kind of things. If that were true, then obviously you definitely want Aaron Lynch back, and he would have had a phenomenal career. I mean, I could you imagine a 2012 defensive line that had Cap, Lewis Nix, Stephon Tuitt, and Aaron Lynch? Because you probably put Aaron Lynch where Prince Shimbo played in order to get them all on the field. I mean, that's probably where you would have played Aaron Lynch, is sort of as that dog linebacker. That was the name of it. It was the dog and the cat, if you remember correctly.
That's right.
Was the name of the 3-4 outside linebackers. I think Kerry Neal in 2010 and 11, and then Danny Spond in 2012, I believe, played the cat. And I may have those two things reversed, but they were the dog and the cat. I mean, that would have been a phenomenal front four. And Aaron would have had a great career. But unfortunately, Aaron, for all his immense talent, was just a poor decision maker, when it came to some of those things. And, it's why he never quite panned out. But even then, he still played how many years in the NFL?
Yeah, exactly.
I mean,
It was a
Even with
handful.
those,
I mean, it was because he was with San Francisco, and I think he went to a
he was
couple
with
of
the
other
Bears
places
for a
as
minute
well.
too. Yeah.
Yeah,
He was a 5th round pick. And he played 7 years in the NFL, had 111 tackles.
5.
Yeah, he had 111 tackles and 21 sacks and 11 pass deflections. And
he doubled the average of the people in the NFL. So,
yeah,
I mean, he did okay for himself, even with all the extra stuff. So, not too bad.
Yeah, the potential is there for him to be something.
Doubt. If it was just about football, I think he could have been really
His first
good.
2 years with the Niners, he had 12 and a half sacks.
Yeah, exactly.
And 7 passes defense. I mean, he could have been a really good player. Just unfortunately, Aaron didn't always make the best life decisions.
There you go. Q Kibbs with the next one. He says, I think we can all agree that the 23 defensive commits is shaping up to be something really special. My question is, when are the offensive studs going to start coming on?
Always focusing on the negative, Q Kibbs. I tell you what. I'm kidding, obviously.
A lot of times it's when the quarterback commits, then they kind of start falling into place. I mean, I'm not saying
here's the thought. Let's wait till they have position coaches in place at
an
some
offensive
of these
line
spots,
coach officially, and a wide receiver
coach.
because
the 2 position coaches they have, the 2 commits they have are at positions where they have a returning coach, right? So I would say let's let these guys get committed, these coaches get committed, and then see how it goes. I think the dominoes will start falling pretty soon once the coach gets committed. Yeah. But then to Vince's point too is part of the reason they don't have a quarterback. Look, if they wanted to just have a quarterback committed, I truly believe they'd have a good quarterback in this class. They're waiting on Dante Moore for at least another month, I would say.
Yeah.
And if things don't work their direction in the next month or 2, then I could see them moving on to a Jackson Arnold, who's a top 100 ranked quarterback, a Chris Vizina, who's a top 100 ranked quarterback. So that's part of it too, is they don't have certain guys in the class by choice.
Right.
And, offensive line, do you really want to take an offensive line commit that your incoming coach hasn't approved of, or hasn't watched film of? Same thing at wide receiver. And the other thing too is they're shooting for some big fish at wide receiver.
Yes, they are.
And those guys tend to take a little while to get in, especially when it's a side of the ball that hasn't played great. I mean, let's be honest. Part of the reason that the defense has so many kids in the class is because the defense has a person that had a personality like a Marcus Freeman as the defensive coordinator. Well, Tommy Rees, as we talked about before the season, is still working on building up his reputation to be that kind of coach. And I think the way the season ended helped. Even the bowl game to a degree helped. I mean, you can say, hey, look, I've had one game as the offensive coordinator who scored 35 points and had 500 passing yards, where it's just me running it the offense the way I want to run it.
Yeah.
Now, I think you could go further back than that and kind of look at how it was in November and say that was what his offense was going to look like. But you get the point that I'm making, right? And so, I think it's a situation where they've done so well in recent classes at running back and the offensive line, at tight end, even at quarterback, where you've gotten Drew Pine and Tyler Buckner in 2 of the 3 years, where you can take your time to maybe wait a little bit longer on a Dante Moore. You need to rush into taking an offensive lineman right now because you've got the guys you want, you've got the players you want. In the previous 2 classes, you've signed 10 offensive linemen in the previous 2 classes. Now it's about identifying impact talent.
Right.
It's
not just for depth. It's not numbers for depth. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So I just say be patient.
Yeah.
It's also still super early. I mean, the thing is they're getting these defensive kids really early.
They are.
And it was really Keon Keeley kind of got the ball rolling. Keon Keeley and then Brennan Vernon committing like right out, like a day apart.
Yep.
Got the ball rolling because, as we've said, kids, big time players want to play with other big time players. So when you get those guys going, then it's like, okay, then you're able to add into Don Schuler. Then you're able to add a Drake Bowen. Then once you get Drake Bowen to add on to that, okay, now Justin Rhett wants to jump on board. Okay, now you got Justin Rhett on board. Now it's easier to get Peyton Bowen on board and so forth and so on. Those dominoes haven't started falling yet for the Notre Dame offense, but they will.
And I really do feel like, especially at wide receiver, they wait for the quarterback. Like it's
to a degree, yeah.
To a degree. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And they're not necessarily only going to be catching passes from that quarterback for the rest of their career, but it's important. Like that's a really important position to have set before the wide receivers start coming in. That's just the pattern that I've noticed over the past. You're muted, Brian.
The other thing too is trying to think how to. The offense has been pretty good the last 2 years, recruiting wise, just who they landed. Now we've had some issues at receiver and numbers and all that, but like overall, running back's been really good the last 2 years. Receiver has brought in some impact players, but you don't just go get numbers. You need to get the right guys. The right guys are going to take a while. Offensive line, you've signed 10 the last 2 years. You've signed 3 tight ends in the last 2 years already, including the kid that's in the class now. So Notre Dame's in a position to be a little pickier on offense too than the defense.
Sure.
Now the defense has been able to get some studs, but the defense needed that. They needed those players. They were able to ride the wave of momentum of Marcus Freeman and all that to get there. This is what we said all along about Tommy Rees. Tommy Rees is going to have to earn his reputation. Marcus Freeman showed up with a reputation.
Right.
That's the difference. And Coach Rees is earning that reputation, and that's coming along. But the other thing, too, is the defensive staff was loaded with really good recruiters.
Mm-hmm.
The offensive staff was not. And that's part of the reason we're seeing changes at those positions, especially wide receiver. So now the good thing is Tommy Rees and Chad Bowden and Dre Brown and the guys that are involved in recruiting right now, they're after some big fish on offense. You know, they're pushing for Jaylen Brown from Florida. They're pushing for Cardinal Tate from Illinois. They're pushing for Rodney Gallagher from Pennsylvania. You know, they're pushing for, Malik Elzy from Chicago. Those are some big time players. And those guys, you're just going to need time to win those battles on offense, because your offense still hasn't proven the things that your defense has proven over the course of several years. So those are all things that factor into why the offense isn't there yet. But look, there aren't any teams with more than 8 commits. Right. I mean, Notre Dame's ahead of schedule right now on defense, and that's part of it too. So I don't want the offensive staff feeling the need to kind of rush to get numbers, because like just trust the process, get the new coaches in place, then you can hit the ground running.
Right. You got time. You have time. This is similar to this question, so I'm going to skip down to this one, but only skipping a couple. Peter says, what is the prospect of signing a 5-star or high 4-star quarterback?
On top of the ones they already have on the roster now, I would say strong. I think if they don't get Dante Moore, there's 2 quarterbacks I have my eye on, and that is Jackson Arnold and Chris Vizina, who are both top 100 recruits. I like
Jackson Arnold's film.
And he's a high school teammate of Peyton Bowen.
Right.
I believe Jackson Arnold on 247 is a top 50 player, like 47, 48, 49, something like that. And Chris Vizina is a top 100 player. I think that's going to go up. I think he's going to end up being a guy that's a top, closer to a top 50-ish kind of guy. As long as they get one of those 3, Notre Dame fans should be happy at quarterback. And this is the danger we run into, is you get so obsessed with Dante Moore. And trust me, I'm the leader of that Dante Moore bandwagon. But not getting Dante Moore doesn't equal bad quarterback, right? It's focusing on who you get. It's like we talked about running back when they didn't get Will Shipley. We criticized the process that got them to that point, but we said, now you just got to figure out who you're going to get, because at the end of the day, you're ultimately evaluated on who you get, not who you miss on. And so as long as they're able to get one of those guys, then to me, they're going to be fine. They're going to be fine at quarterback. Now they're even more fine if they're able to get Dante Moore, but that's going to be a big one. Got a super chat from Jay there, Vince.
Jay, thanks for the super chat. Says, does Billy Shroud solidify himself as a top 100 player with his performance at the All-American Bowl practices? And how do you guys think the other O-line commits fared in practices?
I've watched 0 clips of
me neither.
The All-American Bowl practices, because I don't care. I've said this a million times. And look, and this is someone who in a year from now is going to be paying employees to go cover these games. I don't care what guys do. Their seasons has been over for over a month.
Right.
This is an all-star game. I just don't care. If they've done well, that's great. If they've done poor, I can't sit there and say, folks, this guy's done really well, so that shows this, this, and this. But what if a guy doesn't have a good week? Does that then mean that maybe he's not as good as we thought? I just don't care. These are all-star games. They're meant to be fun. I just don't put a lot of stock in them. I just don't. I like seeing guys up close and seeing guys compete and all that kind of stuff. But how a guy does in 3 practices doesn't really have any impact on to me where they should be ranked. So that's just my 2 cents on that. But to me, Jay, to answer your question, is if you've come to a ranking on a player and it's over the course of 2 or 3 full seasons of football and film and watching him at first in camps or whatever, what happens like in January, over a month, sometimes 2 months after their season is over the course of 3 days should not impact that one way or the other. Unless it's a kid you just don't have a lot of information on coming in. I didn't have a lot of film. I didn't see the kid. I don't, things like that. I think once a kid's reputation is established, to me, these all-star games aren't needle movers for me. Now, they are for the recruiting services because they got to have something to generate clicks and page views and all that kind of stuff. And I understand that. No disrespect intended to that comment. I understand it. It's just for me as an evaluator, it just doesn't mean a whole lot. Yeah. Now, again, I'm going to send my guys down there because they're fun events. It's cool to get interviews. It's cool to see these kids competing against the best of the best and all that other kind of stuff.
And meeting up with guys that they're committed with, all that stuff.
Yeah, right. Absolutely. And it's fun to watch them compete. And it's just another part of the evaluation process. It's just not an evaluation needle mover unless a kid shows up and he's just, wow, I didn't realize how stiff his hips were, or something really noticeably negative, or wow, this kid's speed is even greater than I thought. It'd have to be something really noticeable, not like he won some reps or lost some reps, right? Like, but I'm not going to lie, every now and then when a kid from Notre Dame goes there and like has a big week and I'm like, I told you, but I got to be careful not to do that because it's like, but what if a kid doesn't have a good week? Does it then confirm that kid wasn't as good as we thought? But yeah, I get petty sometimes.
That's
I'm not going to lie to
you. Data Science with Scott. Great name, by the way. Michael Mayer is a stud. However, he's had some problems with dropped passes the last couple of years. Mm-hmm. Where else could his game improve?
He hasn't had a lot of drop passes, but to Scott's point, he's had some crucial drop
key
passes.
Ones. Yes.
Yeah, I think of the one against Oklahoma State. He needs to make that catch. I think of the one against Florida State at the end of regulation. I still feel if Michael Mayer catches that seam route against Florida State late in the fourth quarter, Notre Dame wins before they get to overtime. Do you remember the play I'm talking about, Vince?
Yeah, I do.
And so absolutely. I think with Michael, it's most like the one against Florida State
game he had, right?
Yeah, right. As a freshman, right?
Yeah.
I think sometimes for him, it's more of a concentration issue. He starts thinking about, okay, what am I doing once I get the ball?
Sure.
Like the Florida State when he's thinking like, I know he knew he was wide open against Florida State, right? He knew it. And he's thinking, okay, what am I doing once I make this catch?
Sure, absolutely.
And that's a youthful experience because here's the thing. You got to remember about Michael Mayer is he looks like a grown freaking man.
Oh, my goodness.
And he plays like a grown man.
Yes.
He's like, 19 years old? He's just a sophomore. He still has some maturity in his game he has to get to.
He's got gifts.
He's got the tools.
Man.
He's going to continue to improve as a route runner, although he got better from year 1 to year 2. He can get a lot better as a blocker. He got better as the year went on, but he's not the dominating blocker I think he should be.
Inline blocker. That's where his game, I think, can really take another step. Like he could get to another level as a complete tight end. Mm-hmm. Because if in the NFL, they're going to ask you to inline block. I mean, that's going to happen, right? As good as you are as a split out, receiver of the football and all of those things, you've got to be a good inline blocker. And right now, he's a good inline blocker. He's not a great inline blocker. And so he can definitely get better.
He's inconsistent as a blocker, which, again, understandable because he's a sophomore.
Right.
And that's the thing is just because you're a phenomenal talent doesn't mean you automatically speed up your development.
Right.
You're going to make more plays because you're so gifted, but you still have to go through the same evolution from a technical standpoint that every other player goes through. Most kids don't show up as ready-made products.
Right.
And Michael Mayer was a two-way player in high school, too. I mean, he wasn't just an offensive player. He was an all-state linebacker as a junior and an all-state defensive lineman as a senior or vice versa. I can't remember which one it was. But he was first-team all-state on D-line and linebacker in different years in high school. So he wasn't even like a full-time player at that position. So he's going to – it's just about refinement, really, Scott. That's it, just being more refined, and then just the focus aspect, right? The play against Oklahoma State, that's one I want to see him make, but let's also not forget that was a pretty good play by the defender too.
Sure.
That guy made a pretty good play on the ball and was really tight in coverage. And sometimes we got to remember that those other players are pretty good too at times, and that's kind of something to remember. Real quick, Vince, before we go on to some questions, I got a couple things down here that I want to just quickly address.
Yes.
Q-Kibs, I'm with you on that. Thank you.
Oh, somebody calls him a wizard and then he disappears, which is hilarious to me.
I'm a football wizard, but I'm not a technological wizard.
I thought that was hilarious. He calls you a wizard and then you disappear.
Yeah.
Like I thought that was
I just
great.
wanted to leave it sit out there for a little while. That's really what it was. Tyler Dijak says Arnold is 72 and Vizina is 85 on 247. That's their composite rankings. 24/7 Sports has two rankings. Number one is their own ranking, and then they have the composite ranking. Jackson Arnold, for example, is number 47 by 247 Sports. He's number 72 composite, which takes into account everybody's ranking. So I was referring to what 247 had them ranked as. So 247 Sports has Jackson Arnold as the number 47 player in the country on their own ranking. So I just want to make sure that we're clear on that. And Chris Vizina is number 97 on their ranking. He's number 85 on the composite. So that's what I was referring to with those. So that's what I wanted to get to. And then we have
this is my favorite.
Here we go.
I love this question because it comes up a lot.
Yeah.
Beast Daniel, thanks for the super chat. Any chance Freeman will hire a dedicated quarterback coach for better player development? And OC has too much on their plate to spend the necessary time for tangible growth.
I strongly disagree with that sentiment. I mean, everything the offensive coordinator is doing is something the quarterback has to know. Everything. So I think that if you decide you want to do that, and I think the problem is because too many people are looking at the NFL. Well, that's how it is in the NFL. Okay.
You can have unlimited coaches in the NFL.
Yeah, you have 20 assistant coaches in the NFL.
Right.
This is college football.
You get 10.
I don't want Tommy Rees having to teach a quarterback's coach something that he wants the quarterback to do. I just want him to do it. And so I'm perfectly fine with Tommy Rees being the quarterback's coach and the offensive coordinator. And look, and here's the thing you have to remember. Notre Dame has a GA that works with the quarterback. So there are times when the GA, who Tommy Rees knows and trusts, will take them and work them through drills while Tommy Rees goes and spends time with the O-line and the receivers or things like that. So that's helpful. But I don't accept the premise. It's like with anything, folks. It's like, is it better to be in the booth or up in the press box? There's no right or wrong answer. In general, it's a right or wrong answer for a specific coach based on what he's more comfortable with. You can certainly I went through it recently and pointed out how Alabama's last however many coordinators on all their title teams were all also the quarterback's coach. Bill O'Brien's the quarterback's coach. Steve Sarkisian was the quarterback's coach. Lane Kiffin was the quarterback's coach. Jim McElwain was the quarterback's coach, for Pete's sake. Doug Nussmeier was the quarterback's coach. So, and then I can point to you teams that have crappy offenses where the offensive coordinator is the quarterback's coach. It's just about, is your guy capable of doing it? And I think, look, Jack Cohn got better and better and better and better as the 2022 season went on. And that was working with Tommy Rees. So I think sometimes these things they get stated and then they just kind of become a life of their own.
That's exactly what happened with
because then what is Tommy Rees going to coach? Just be the coordinator? I mean, I guess that's fine if you have unlimited coaches.
Right.
But I don't think it's, I like how Notre Dame has it set up. When they're in team stuff, they have a GA that works with the quarterbacks who can notice some of the footwork things that he's getting that he knows Tommy Rees wants.
Exactly.
As Tommy works in the whole offense, but then they get back in the film room. I want Tommy Rees being the guy in his ear. Mm-hmm. So I personally don't have an issue with it in theory. It's how look. When I had aspirations of being I was pass game coordinator and things like that, and when I became a head coach, I planned on still coaching, at the D3 level. I'd interviewed in the high school level. I'd interviewed for some head coaching jobs, and I had every intention of being the play caller and quarterbacks coach. So that's just my personal opinion. Other people, obviously, I know Malik Zaire has a different opinion on this subject. That's fine. I think there's enough evidence that if you have someone competent and qualified to do both, they can easily do both and be great at it. Ryan Day was that, has been done that at Ohio State. So I don't view it to be the issue that some people view it to be, in my opinion.
All right, back to the top, sir. Matt says, after seeing Clark Lee's recruiting deficiencies bite us against the Pokes, I was surprised to see Vanderbilt with a good 22 class for them. Looking back, are you surprised Clark Lee didn't recruit better?
No, I don't think so. Because I think at Vanderbilt, he's back to where he's comfortable with, right? Like, what are They did have a nice class for Vanderbilt, but it was what? It was a lot of under the radar guys, guys that aren't necessarily elite players, guys that have tools that he gets on early. And that's Clark Lee's wheelhouse.
Right.
Finding the Prince Collies when Notre Dame got Prince Collie, he was a 3-star kid that nobody'd really heard of. And then by the time he was all said and done, he was a top 100 recruit. So I think that's more his wheelhouse, in my opinion. And he wasn't really a grinder. And at Vanderbilt, that's okay, because the top players on your board at Vanderbilt, you're not getting. They're going to go other places. So it's about being patient, staying in the game, finding the right fit, finding that under the radar, high upside, low floor kid that doesn't get a lot of the attention. I think a place like Vanderbilt's right up his wheelhouse, just like it was at Wake Forest. I think at Notre Dame, where you've got to go after the big boys, you've got to go after the big dogs. That's when he struggled a little bit, in opinions. No, I'm surprised that he didn't recruit better at Notre Dame. Just like I'm not surprised that they're doing a night. And it's not just him too. He hired a friend of mine on the staff who I know is a good recruiter. He hired Barton Simmons to be sort of his director of football operations thing. Barton knows the recruiting game. He was at 24/7 Sports. He knows coaches. He knows kids. He knows all this kind of stuff.
It's important.
He did a great job of putting a good recruiting staff together as well. And that was one of the best things Clark Lee did, because that's what Marcus Freeman needs to do and every other coach. That's not an insult to Clark Lee. That's a compliment to Clark Lee, because that's what a great coach needs to do, is surround yourself with other great people. And, the staff he put together from a recruiting standpoint is pretty good. Now, we'll see what kind of coaching staff they are when it gets to Saturdays, but we're not going to really know till year 3, in my opinion, whether or not Clark Lee has the chops to win at Vanderbilt, because he inherited a pretty rough situation. Not just a mess, but it's Vanderbilt in the SEC, right? It's not it's not so much a mess as it's just the culture was so bad because they had lost so much. And Derek Mason we'll probably talk about him during the show. Some guys are just meant to be coordinators or assistants, not head coaches. And that's my critique of Coach Mason. Got another one for you, Vince?
All right, from Raheem Pelham, thank you very much for the super chat. Love IB. What player or players is no one talking about that has the biggest chance to make a huge leap next year? Keep up the good work. We will definitely try.
Yeah, thanks for that, Raheem. Can I? I'm going to do this one first, Vince, because I got a comment to make on this, Raheem. The hard part about this is we do so many shows and we take so many questions that it's kind of like hard to find someone that we haven't talked about at some point.
I know, right?
And so, but that's kind of the good thing. But I'm going to take a swing at this one.
I got one on offense, one on defense.
Okay, go, Vince.
I got, and again, we've talked about these guys, but I don't think that they're getting the attention that they deserve, from maybe an overall situation. So I have Lorenzo Styles, and yes, he had a huge game against Oklahoma State, but I think that he's going to just break through next year, and I think it's going to be a lot of fun to watch. And then I got Riley Mills on defense. Mm-hmm. Those are my two, and I think moving Riley Mills to the big end position is a really, really good move. I really think he's got the athleticism to be out there, and that he can make some waves out there. I'm curious to see what they do with Justin, if they're going to move him back over or leave him at Viper, but I think Riley Mills can make some waves out there.
The reason I'm going to say not going to go with Lorenzo Styles is not because I don't agree with you. It's just I'm on the message board a lot more than you are, and on Twitter a lot more than you are, and he gets a lot of conversation.
Okay.
He gets a lot of talk. So, again, different circles, cool. It's totally fine. So I just want to make it seem and we are going to block that guy. If you're going to come in here and insult players and tell them that they need to quit the team or things like that, I got no use for you. You can go somewhere else. So we're going to act like grown-ups here.
What is wrong
you
with people?
Clown. Okay, so back to my right. We got to have like an age limit here or something like that, because some of the stuff here is just some of these, and it's we have 400, 600 some people in our chat, and it's like 2 people.
Yeah,
just
right.
2
Exactly.
people.
Exactly.
So anyway, I'm not gonna focus anymore on that guy because he is now gone. So my question is, I'm gonna go with Deion Colsey and Mike Huff and Q Kibbs. Mike Huff said that immediately, and then Q Kibbs had one. And here's why I say that about Deion. The thing about Deion is we've seen a lot in Notre Dame's history. One, we project Deion to take over the W position, right? The W position has led Notre Dame in receptions or receiving yards each of the last 5 years. Not since Will Fuller has Notre Dame had anyone other than the W lead the team in receptions or yards. Now, that's going to change next year, just like it did this year. Michael Mayer led the team in receptions. Kevin Austin led the team in receiving yards.
Sure.
So the W's led the team in one of those two categories. We have also seen with guys like Golden Tate, Will Fuller, Equanimous St. Brown, even to a degree, Miles Boykin, but his situation was different. The first three were guys that had 6 or fewer catches as freshmen. So Golden Tate had 6 catches as a freshman. Will had 6 catches as a freshman. And then Equanimous had 1 as a freshman. And then the following year, they all had breakouts. Golden and Will had over 1,000 yards. Equanimous went for 50-some catches for 961. Had they played a bowl game, he probably goes over 1,000, but they didn't play a bowl game in 2016.
Right.
So we've seen that before. I think the other thing that people have to remember about Dion is a year younger age-wise than a lot of kids in his class. So he's got even more physical development. He's about to make that senior year to freshman year of high school jump that most kids make. He's already a year ahead of schedule because he got to make that even younger at a younger age than a lot of other guys. And I think that the snaps he got late in the year with all the injuries is going to help him. But the biggest thing is he's finally going to get coached. And that's the big thing for me. He is a raw kid that just got by on being really better than everyone else around him talent-wise. He's going to get coached and pushed this offseason in ways he's never been coached and pushed before. And that's why I could see Dion really having a breakout year of having 40-plus catches. I'm not saying he's going to lead the team in receptions because there's this guy named Michael Mayer, because of Lorenzo Styles, guys like that. But, for me, it's going to be, to me, I think Dion's a guy that we're not talking a lot about him right now. That is someone that I think we would. I think Riley Mills is a good one. Somebody, Ethan O'Connor said Maris Luafau. I feel like Maris gets talked about a lot. That's why I'm not going with him.
Yeah, right.
And, so he's not someone I'm going to go with. I think defensively, the Riley one is really good because he kind of got lost in the mix this year, and I think he could be a big-time breakout player next year. I really do. I think that's a good one. It's hard for me to go anywhere else on that. And because all the other guys I think of that could have breakout years next year, guys we talk a lot about, Ramon Henderson,
I know, right?
Xavier Watts, even if Xavier Watts even stays on defense. I could go with Ryan Barnes, a young corner that I think could break out. I think he might be another guy that I would consider putting in that conversation as well.
No, I think Ryan Barnes is a good one too, for sure.
Yeah,
for sure. Got a super chat from Jim. Thank you very much, Jim. Seems the defense regressed with fundamentals, tackling, backside contain, over penetration, poor pass rush lanes. Your thoughts? And Brian, have you had a Kewpie burger lately?
To answer your second one, that's a Lima, Ohio thing, baby.
Oh, okay.
And Jim, you asked a question at the end of the show last time that I didn't get to. I played quarterback at Bath growing up, but I left after the 8th grade, so I would have played quarterback in high school, but I moved to Virginia before that, so I just wanted to address that question as well. I haven't had a Kewpie since the last time I went and visited my grandma, which was before the season. Kewpie is a burger joint in Lima, Ohio. It's a famous. Gotcha. It's been around.
It's a local joint.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Local. Yeah. I mean, they have 3 of them in the Lima area, but it's just a Lima. It's a Lima, like that Northwest Ohio kind of thing. And, we went there on field trips when I was a kid. We'd go to the zoo or we'd go to the symphony or different things, and we'd always go to Kewpie afterwards.
That's awesome.
But so I haven't been there since the summer when I had my grandma visiting. But honestly, Jim, that's one of the reasons to answer your first part of your question, that's one of the reasons that I don't give a whole lot of time and emphasis on the specifics of what happens in a bowl game, just because it's such a different thing that I think bowl games matter. I love bowl games. I hate that we've diminished the meaning of bowl games.
Yeah.
I just don't put as much on the outcome of bowl games in this regards. I think they're very important from a momentum standpoint, a big picture standpoint. Did you win or lose? But the specifics of it, I don't often, because it's you've got a whole month to prepare for a game. The only other time you can really point to that as an example is the first game of the year.
Right.
Other than that, it's just so different than that. You're out of your routine. You're out of all, it's just such a different thing. But some of those things I don't think were regressions. Some of those things I think have been issues all along. The over penetration, the poor pass rush lanes kind of go together. the backside contained, that's really been an issue for a while. Just down the stretch, they didn't play any teams that could really exploit it.
Right.
But even then, if you have better cornerback play in the game, that stuff doesn't hurt you as much, and you still win the game.
Also,
they were just able to throw balls up and make plays, and at the end of the day, that's what beat Notre Dame. And their inability to make those plays is a big reason why they had that issue. So we have a real quick thing from Tommy. So Jim, thank you for the question. Tommy Gunn says, Brian, how close is this burger place to the Lima Tank Wash? I'm there all the time. I don't know the answer to that, but I can look that up while Vince is finding his next question.
Very good. Dustin DeMumbrum. That's a fun last name. DeMumbrum. Do you think schools that are not putting together shady NIL deals like Texas A&M will illustrate to those prospects that they are leaving money on the table? The NFL is where the real money is made. I know Notre Dame has a pitch about NIL.
Yeah.
But it's not a shady pitch like other places. It's a legitimate, like, here's your opportunity. You know, they don't have like deals lined up. They're like, if you come here, you can sign this, 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 and this. I don't believe that that's the way the Notre Dame pitch goes. It's, hey, this is Notre Dame. If you come here and you do what you do, there are opportunities, and they may lay out some of the opportunities that other players have had and some things of that nature. But they're not putting it like, hey, you come here, this is you. Like, you know, it's not painted that way, and it shouldn't be. And I like that.
And I think that they are going to illustrate that. That's something Notre Dame is going to illustrate.
Sure.
Notre Dame's going to illustrate, yeah, you can get that $1 million cash in now, right? Or you can play the long game, which is you're going to come here, you're going to get coached better, we're going to play better, you're going to better degree, and you're going to turn that $1 million into 20 or 30. Those are things that I think Notre Dame can certainly pitch and go with. No question about it.
And this is some along the similar lines, and you can just say, hey, we just answered that, but I wanted to pull it up from Irishman. He says, with all the pay-to-play NIL abuse and courting transfers nonsense going on, barring the NCAA growing a spine and changing the rules, how does Notre Dame legitimately recruit the big boys?
Same way they are right now.
And not all the big boys are looking to cash in.
That's the other thing. That's exactly right. It's finding the right fit. It's finding that kid, to the last question, that is able to look at the big picture. Look, if a kid's looking for an immediate payday, you're not going to get that guy. But here's the fact, folks. That's always been true. Those kids the kids that took the money to go to A&M now are the kids that would take money to go to A&M or Bama before. Right. Now it's just legal.
Yeah, exactly.
You know, those guys are always looking for that. Look, I'll tell you a story. There was a question somebody asked earlier, like, what's one of your favorite recruiting stories? I'm going to tell you.
I think I know where this is going.
There was a player, it was during the Charlie Weiss era.
Mm-hmm.
There was a player from the Southeast, right, who ended up at Notre Dame, had a nice, good, long career at Notre Dame, played in the NFL for a number of years. And he was on the phone talking to a school from the ACC. Won't say the school. And the kid looks at his dad and he says, he's like, they're, because this is like actual phones, right? It's back in the 2000s. And he says, this guy's talking to me about, what's it going to take for me to go there. And he's talking about money and stuff like that. And the kid was kind of offended by it. So he hands the phone to his dad. His dad said, this is so-and-so. I'm so-and-so's father. If you ever call my house again, I'm going to report you to the NCAA. Click. Right? I mean, there are parents like that. This assumption that every parent wants a payday or every parent wants this. No, some parents, Louis Nix wanted to go to the NFL after his junior year. Does everybody remember that? He wanted to go after 2012, but his mom said, you promised me you were going to get your degree. So he stayed. Now, if you know anything about Louis Nix and where he's from a rough part of Jacksonville. His mom doesn't have a lot of money, but his mom's belief was it's better for my son long-term to get that degree. And there's a lot of people like that understand that it's the long play is more important. And it's not just about, and this is a pitch that Notre Dame had. And Urban Meyer did this. Urban Meyer stole this from Notre Dame and used it beautifully at Ohio State. But he would say, look, if you come to Notre Dame, we have a lot of football players in the Mendoza business program. Those guys like Todd Light, he'll point to Todd Light, Jerome Bettis, guys that have taken their money that they made in the NFL and turned it into even more money because of their business background, because of the relationships, not just their own knowledge, but the relationships they build with normal students at Notre Dame that become these CEOs and these investment bankers and all that can kind of help then turn that money into even more money.
They become business owners. They become all of these, like Rick Meyer has a winery, and we talked to Rick Meyer on one of my other shows, and he's talking about all these business opportunities, and he didn't sound like a football player. He sounded like a businessman.
Right. Brandon Wimbush has started an NIL company with a former Notre Dame student.
They were so ahead of the game with that.
But he's a guy that Brandon met at Notre Dame who is just a business major guy.
He's a student. Yeah.
And so those things there's a lot of kids out there. Like, look, you could say, well, look, they got a lot of these kids before the NIL stuff started. True. Not Peyton Bowen.
Right.
I mean, Peyton Bowen could go to Texas A&M if he wanted to, but Peyton Bowen comes from a family where his family understands the long game. The long game is more important. There have always been kids that are going to go to an Alabama, an Auburn, a Texas A&M, a Texas, a Clemson for the immediate payment. But that's been true in the 60s, the 70s, and the 80s, the 90s, all the way up to today. And yet Notre Dame still recruited the big boys because not every kid is looking for a handout. Exactly. And that's the thing that often gets lost in this culture of, well, as long as he's getting paid, I don't care what he does. Not everybody believes that. Thank God not everyone believes that.
Right.
Some people understand that it's more important for me and my son that he goes and gets an education and goes and plays with people that are going to develop him as a young man. It's just as important to me as a mother or as a father as they're offering him $500,000.
Exactly.
Because that $500,000, you do not understand how quickly a teenager can spend $500,000 if there's no guidance.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And so those are the things to me that
no question.
Yeah.
John A1, what's up, John? He says, if Riley Mills switches to the big end, will he shed weight like MTA? Will Jacob Lacey put weight back on this offseason?
I don't know. I don't think he's going to need to shed weight.
I was going to say, I think
Riley's body is kind of already built for that. He's a pretty jacked up kid here,
and he's a long kid too. Like
here's why MTA lost weight, because he over bulked up to play inside.
Right.
He had to put on weight that wasn't natural for him. If you look at, I got sent a picture yesterday of Riley Mills working out. It's muscle. He's muscle. I mean, he would have had to kind of put on some bad weight to stay inside full time. Not bad weight. He'd had to put on a little bit of midsection weight to be in, to hold up inside eventually as the starter. As a big end, he doesn't have to do that now. And I think that's something that's gonna be important.
Connor O'Doherty says, how much could Justin Ademilola improve his game next year?
A little bit. I think the thing for Justin and Jason is they both got to finish better.
Mm-hmm.
They've both had a lot of opportunities this year to get more sacks, more tackles for loss that they missed on. That's something that they and the rest of the D-line have to get a lot better at. That they missed a lot of they had 41 sacks this year, 42 sacks this year. They should have had over 50. I mean, they missed a lot of those opportunities, and that's the biggest area that they all need to improve upon. And if they can do that, that alone makes them all much more impactful players, because instead of Spencer Sanders running for 15, back to the original question that Jim Halloran was asking about, now you're all of a sudden on 1st and 10. It's like J.D. Bertrand, one of the first touchdown drive that Oklahoma State had. J.D. Bertrand has a chance for a sack on 1st and 10 at the beginning of the drive. If he makes that sack, that drive's over.
Exactly.
And Notre Dame goes up, 28-0.
Yep. They missed.
Game's over at that point in time.
They missed. Yeah.
And there was too many opportunities like that.
Agreed. And then John, follow up with Jacob Lacey, says, will he reach his potential in 22? He's been limited by injuries in the past. Can he still make a jump?
I think he can. He's just got to stay healthy, right? I mean, and even this year he's a little banged up. He wasn't fully back to the conditioning he needed to be in. I think another year in a weight room where he can get stronger is going to be a key for him. Because remember, Jacob had a lot of shoulder injuries. And the problem with shoulder injuries is that they tend to take away a lot from your what you can do in a weight room to work on the power, the extension, and all those type. You can't do things like this. You can't do a lot of power cleans. A lot of things that really get your power from, you lose when you've got a shoulder injury, right, Vince? I mean, that's the thing.
Yeah.
It's like you can leg press.
Absolutely.
But even then you can't fully leg press, because when you really leg press, you grab onto something and you've got to brace yourself. But you can't do that when you got a shoulder injury. You just got to put your arms like this, and you've got it because your natural instinct is to grab onto something.
Yeah.
And then that messes your shoulder up. And so you got to go like this to leg press when you've got a shoulder injury, which then again takes away from just how much you can do. So I think that's where you're gonna see him kind of make those jumps if he can stay healthy. And I think Jacob could be a really impactful player. And moving Riley Mills to big end, which is what we're hearing Notre Dame is going to do, is going to give him, that's even more snaps for him, for Jacob and Howard Cross next year. Plus Kurt Hinish is gone. So you're going to see Gabriel Rubio get more snaps. Aiden Keanaaina, those are two guys that to me have to have big off seasons, in my opinion, for this Notre Dame defense. They could ultimately, we're talking about Foskey and the Adamiolas and Riley Mills and Jacob Lacey, but to me, if this defense is going to be truly, truly elite, they need one or both of Aiden and Gabriel to step up and be legitimate contributors. We saw a little bit of Aiden in the Fiesta Bowl. They need one of those two guys to step up, and if both of them step up, this defensive line is just going to be absolutely, absolutely filthy. I can't wait to see it.
Got a couple super chats if you want to grab those, Brian. Mike Huff, thanks for the super chat, Mike. He says, what's the over-under on true freshmen starting in 22, especially on defense? So I'm setting it at like 0.5 because I went through the list in my head very briefly because I cheated and I looked ahead. And offensively, I don't see any true freshmen starting. And then defensively, the only position group where maybe
we're talking barring injury, right?
Yes,
barring injury.
Like legitimately coming out of camp, like yes, like you earn your spot. Maybe linebacker would be the only spot where maybe a true freshman starts. Maybe.
I would go with corner. And like Jay Wiki Jr. said, Benjamin Morrison. I'd say Benjamin Morrison or Jaden Mickey would not shock me if one of those two guys eventually earned a starting job. Because like a linebacker, it's going to be tough, in my opinion, for Jalen Sneed to beat out Maris Luafau as a starter. Maybe Rover, maybe, but like I don't think the freshmen are going to. And let's not forget, Prince Colley's sitting there waiting on a place to start.
Yeah, no doubt. That's why I think a corner are going to start.
Right. That's why I think corners to me where look, because none of the freshmen and none of the current freshmen stood out enough to earn reps when your starting corners was getting
shocks
torched.
Me, but yeah,
so it's not like Ryan Barnes or Phillip Riley or Chance Tucker had like 200, 300 snap advantage on those guys. I mean, Jaden Mickey's showing up next week to Notre Dame. He's going to be there in the winter and spring. And he's the kid that I think is, of all the corners that one thing we always said is I think Benjamin Morrison has a higher ceiling, but Jaden Mickey to me was the most ready to play right now. And I think Benjamin Morrison, when he arrives this summer, is a guy that could push for it too. So I actually think one of the corner spots is where we could see a freshman play.
Okay.
Other than that, I mean, it would require, to me, it'd have to be an injury.
Yeah, because
there's
Tobias, so many young guys
Tobias Merriweather,
playing.
if the right coach is hired, I could see Tobias Merriweather eventually starting as a freshman.
Okay. Yeah,
I could see him and Dion playing opposite each other.
He's the only one that I would have thought about on offense anyway. But yeah,
only one.
Injury.
Only one.
An injury situation. There's so many young guys playing on both sides of the ball right now.
Already.
It's tough to find a place for a true freshman.
Right. Now, I think someone will play. I think one of Tyson Ford or Aiden Gabera will play as a freshman, if not both. I think I think at least Burnham, Sneed, and Junior will play as freshmen. Now, I think that
special teamers.
I think Morrison and Mickey will play as freshmen. Now, whether or not they start is the different conversation.
Yes,
but I think a lot of them will play.
Fair enough.
A lot of them will play.
We got a couple more down there, I think, and I'm gonna have to get going here soon. But Brandon, thank you for the super chat. Brandon, Brian and Vince, which position change would you like the most? Think the team needs the most, and then mostly to happen, excluding any confirmed position changes. So there's like 15 questions in here. What I like the most, which the team needs the most, and most likely to happen.
You want to go ahead, Vince, since you said you have to leave soon?
Yeah, I still like Clarence Lewis at safety better than at corner. We've mentioned that one in the past. Riley Mills going from the inside to the outside. Yes, that's a position change, but it's not a major position change. I I would be upset if they moved Xavier Watts from defense to back to offense again. I think that would only hurt his development. So I don't like that possibility happening. People have brought up Chris Tyree to the slot. I do not like that as far as a permanent position change. Play him there as a running back. I'm fine with, at times, right? No problem with that. I do not want him moved as a wide receiver. I would not like that at all. So that's one I would really not.
I still would like to see Xavier Watts moved back to offense, and I know people are going to hate that, but I think with the new I think he wants to play offense. He's always wanted to play offense, and here's the thing.
Do you think?
Yes.
Okay.
Look. When I started as a true freshman, a wide receiver, do you think a day went by where I was like, "Gee, I don't miss playing quarterback at all"? No, you always if that's your true love, that's your true love. He left offense because he wanted to play and he didn't like Dell Alexander. Well, Dell's gone. Yeah. You're gonna have a new receivers coach. There's openings at that position, right? I think if they approached him, and I wrote about this, if they approached him and say, "You're gonna play. We're going to get you the ball. You're going to play." I think he would move.
And that's,
I think, especially if they're able to get Brandon Joseph as a transfer at safety, there's no Brandon Joseph that we know of at receiver right now.
Right.
And to me, true. If you have a new receivers coach, and if you're actually going to play 4 or 5 guys, there's no doubt that Xavier would be one of my 4 or 5 guys.
I think his ceiling is the highest offensively.
I think so too.
I think so.
I just think he brings that after the catch ability they just don't have a lot of.
Yeah, right.
And I think Xavier Lorenzo Styles is Lorenzo Styles and Braden Lindsey are more similar than they are with Xavier Watts, who's more of a shaky kind of guy. So that's what
The only thing I would want to make sure of, and I don't know the answer to this, I mean, you're closer to the situation than I am, would be if he's up for it, then you do it. Like if he's sick of moving back and forth.
You don't move him if he doesn't want to move, Vince. I mean, that's never going to happen.
Right.
I'm just saying, I think if he wants to play offense, that's a move that I would make. The other moves are like Lug to guard, Mills to big end. Those are position changes, but they're small.
Right.
The other one that I'd like to see that I think could help him and the offense is JoJo Johnson, a wide receiver.
I was wondering if you were going to go there with him.
That's another one I would like to see.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's another one I'd like to see. All right, Vince, you got time for any more?
Yeah, well, throw up that last super chat. I don't know what it says, so let's. I think we got one more, don't we?
No, that's the last one. Oh no, we actually have a couple more since then. Here we go.
All right,
Felix Fournier.
What's up, Felix? He says, "Hello, IB Nation. How is the Jason Onye coming along? I think Elston liked him a lot coming out of high school."
I haven't heard a lot about him lately. But he was a guy that I was told impressed a lot in the summer, fall, and early season workouts. I haven't asked about him lately, but he caught some people's eyes early in the season. And look, guys like him, Gabriel Rubio, who battled injury all year, they would have played more if not for they're just so deep and loaded on the D line.
Yeah,
I mean, there's guys that didn't play now that would have played a ton back in 17 and 18 as rotation guys, but the depth was so good now. You just it was huge. And then we got another one from Caleb Collins.
And Caleb, thanks for the super chat, Caleb. He says, "What's going on with the D coordinator, candidates, leaders? It's kind of still all over the place, isn't it, Brian? I mean,
there's 2 names I've heard more than any others.
Okay.
In the last several days, and I was talking with Sean Davis about this too, and they're hearing the same thing. The two that I've heard the most are John Heacock and more so lately Derek Mason, which is interesting. Because I don't think he did a good job as the head coach of Vanderbilt. I didn't like some of the comments he made about Notre Dame when he brought Vanderbilt here back in 2018. But I also think he was a phenomenal defensive coordinator at Stanford. I thought he did a really good job getting this year's Auburn defense going. I mean, Derek Mason's the guy that orchestrated that Auburn defense that basically shut Alabama down the entire game. And he was known as a good recruiter, as a position coach. So he's an intense guy, which I think hurt him as a head coach. He's an intense, emotional guy. And I don't mean emotional in a negative way. I mean, he's a really intense guy. And that can work for a coordinator. I don't know how it works for a head coach, which is why I've always been really I'm not sure how good of a head coach Brent Venables is going to be. Because Brent Venables like that. He's a really intense, emotional guy. And that's why I'm really curious how he's going to do at Oklahoma, because I don't think that translates well to head coach as well. But Derek Mason and Jim Heacock are the two names that I hear the most associated. And then honestly, if it's either one of those two guys, I'm absolutely fired up about that.
Right.
So, and then Derek Mason also brings some head coaching experience to the table,
Yes,
and a veteran. He's coaching he's coaching now 2 academic schools, one in the Pac-12, one in the SEC. There are some things that he's going to be. Hey, this is what one of the things that I had to experience at Vanderbilt or Stanford, and here's some things I learned under Harbaugh or David Shaw or as a head coach that I think he can bring that head coaching experience that can help Marcus Freeman along. That's the other real big positive that would come from Derek Mason. I'm not saying he's going to be the hire. Those are just the two names I've heard the most of. Recently for me.
Absolutely.
There's another one, Vince.
I'll throw it up here and then I got to take off.
Okay.
But Andrew, thanks for the super chat. Andrew, join the board and love the content. If we ignore recruiting for a second, what are the coaching style and technique differences between Quinn and Harry Hiestand? I'm going to hang up and listen to your answer. You're muted, brother.
You don't just do this. That way, when I edit the thing for the podcast, I don't have to mute out the thing about that. So just do what we were talking about before. But you want to take a shot at this, Vince? Oh, I guess he doesn't want to take a shot at it. To me, the difference in coaching style and technique is, number one, is the first 2 steps of an offensive line are super important. And when I look at one of the big criticisms I had of Jeff Quinn in recent years, when I evaluated him and what his staff or what he did as a position coach, it was a lot of your first 2 steps never took you forward, and they never put you in position to strike. And so your first step, and there's really no way I can show it, but your first step was always like kind of up and down, and your second step was kind of up and down, which means there's no trigger, because like you can actually take a step where you pick your foot up and you put it right back down in place, where you're actually triggering power, where you come with your second step is the one that comes with power. Or, your first step, you step with power and you bring your hands. And so there was not a lot of power coming from the steps. They would catch a lot. They didn't strike a lot. Jeff Quinn would teach guys to use their hands in really strange ways. A lot of locking out, and the hand play was really poor, and they didn't take great angles in the run game. I think those are 3 areas that with Harry Hiestand, the footwork from a power standpoint was significantly better. How they use their hands was significantly better. And that those 2 things lead to being better finishers in the run game. And I think that's very, very important. I think those things also contribute better to being better in combo blocks, because when you're catching a combo block, it's harder to overtake. It's hard to work up to the second level. And outside of 2020, Notre Dame's offensive line really often struggled getting to the second level. That's something Harry Hiestand's offensive lines were very, very good at. I think the one thing that we saw a little bit better job of from Jeff Quinn for most of his tenure is I think sometimes Coach Hiestand's lines were a little bit too aggressive, which would cause them to kind of, maybe make some mistakes in pass pro. They're going to have to clean that up a little bit. But I think those are the biggest differences for me. And my voice is starting to go. Andrew, thank you for joining the board. And Seth Clark also just joined the board. I see that too. I'm only going to have a couple more questions here, folks, because my voice is starting to go. As you all know, I've been dealing with a little bit of a head cold all week. And so I'm not feeling great. And as the longer I talk, the more my voice goes. So I'm going to try to go do a few more here. Nicholas Grosh says, belated Happy New Year's to the IB boys. Thank you for all your great Notre Dame football content. Appreciate that very, very much. I'm going to get down here to a few more of these questions. Tyler Bengi, Brian will love that Jay Bateman is out at North Carolina, reported by Bruce Feldman. Look, I think it's a smart move. I hope you all understand. I don't ever take joy when a coach is fired, because this is I know what that means. I know how that feels. I've experienced it once in my career. I've experienced it like with friends of mine in the business, having gone through it. I don't take joy that Jeff Quinn was fired or Del Alexander was fired or Jay Bateman was hired. It's just, as an analyst, it's my job to point out that this guy stinks and isn't doing a good job. But that's a smart move for Mac Brown, because he was absolutely just did a bad job. I don't know how else to say it. He just did a really bad job. Ryan Rush says, any chance Notre Dame goes after Titus Mokio out of Malala, and who's in the portal? He's from UCF. I wouldn't. I don't think that's really a needle mover at receiver. I would rather move guys from DB over to receiver than to get a kid like him. I think if you're going to get a receiver in the portal, you've got to get a guy that can play at a higher level than that. And I just, I wouldn't go there. Tyler Longbreak says, I was surprised Keeley and Vernon committed so early. I think Vernon was a higher ranking at the time. He was a top 10 player at the time, 5-star player. And he's, of course, slowly gone down ever since. Irish Chi-Town, with Kevin Austin leaving and George Tech staying, would it make sense for us to run more double tight end packages? We're going to see that. We saw that a lot in the bowl game as well. We're definitely going to see some of that here for Notre Dame moving forward. Now, the key is going to be not just that they're going to do it, but they've got to make sure that they nuance it more, which means if you're going to run a lot of 2 tight end personnel, you've got to throw to your number 2 tight end more. And you've got to throw to your number 3 tight end from time to time as well. But that's going to be the big thing. The effectiveness of those packages is going to increase if they're more willing to throw to the number 2 tight end in those packages. If that guy's just a blocker and he runs routes, but he's not a guy that you target. George Takis, for example, this year played over 400 snaps and he was targeted 4 times. He ran over 100 pass routes and he was targeted 4 times. Basically, teams say we don't need to worry about covering that guy. And one of those catches was when Michael Mayer was out. So I think when you look at Notre Dame, they're going to have to figure out a way to incorporate the number 2 tight end more into the offense. Now, one way to do that is to start using Michael Mayer in 12 personnel as the boundary receiver at times. Then he can run the boundary receiver routes, and then Michael Mayer can run the routes that previously were run by George Takis or whoever the number 2 tight end is, can start running the routes that the tight end previously would run, which makes him more of a focal point in the offense as opposed to the number 2 tight end routes. Down here, some more questions, folks. I'm just trying to get to a couple more because my throat's about shot. William Perry, Vincent Bryan, how realistic is it that the 2022 team makes the playoffs in your opinion? I think it's still too early to tell. Talk to me after we find out what Isaiah Foskey is going to do. Talk to me after they put the staff together. But I think it's realistic. I don't know if it's something I would I don't know if right now, today, I'm saying I'm predicting it's going to happen. I need to see how Tyler Buckner and progresses during the spring. I need to see how some other players progress during the spring. I need to see how there's just a lot that needs to happen. A lot of guys need to step into roles. Who steps up a receiver, and how does Deion Colsey progress? How does Tyler Buckner progress? Who is there a number 2 corner that comes and challenges the other, Clarence Lewis more? There's just a lot of things I need to see happen that right now makes me say I think Notre Dame is a 10-2 to 11-1 possible team. But with the way the schedule shapes up, I don't know if right now I'd predict a playoff, but I do expect them to go into November with at least an opportunity to be a playoff team. I think that's kind of where they need to be as a program, just like it was under Brian Kelly. You need to be able to go into November saying, hey, I think this is a team that if the things can go right, they may be a playoff team, which is what happened this year and what needs to happen next year, in my opinion. I'm trying to get to a couple more here. Then we're going to get to it. I've seen this question asked a couple times. Do you think Jack Cohn can be drafted late round? Appreciate your thoughts. I think it's possible. I think it's this draft class is going to be harder for a guy to get drafted in because I think we're going to not see the early run that we saw last year. So I think it's going to kind of push all the quarterbacks back. but it's also not a great quarterback year. So I could see it. I think Jack Cohn's a guy that could be in the NFL for a while as a backup quarterback, but I don't know. I don't know if I would. It just would depend on my quarterback situation and my total number of draft picks. But I could see a 6th or 7th round for him if in the right situation, and maybe a team that has a lot of draft picks that they can use one on him. But I think his lack of mobility and he doesn't have a great arm are the two reasons why I'd be a little nervous about maybe taking him unless I had some good draft capital to work with. That's just kind of my 2 cents. He was a really good college quarterback, but I need to see somebody with a little bit of a stronger arm and to really kind of take that next, take that leap to just really going after him. Caleb Collins asks, well, thank you for the super chat, Caleb. Nico off the board. It's not off the board. It's just kind of what I've been saying all along, which is I just don't see that as a fit in either direction. I mean, I know he's a guy that people have reported likes Notre Dame and all that, but there's a reason I've kind of been poo-pooing that for a while because I just don't think he's a fit at Notre Dame. And I don't think he's going to love some of the things that Notre Dame is about when you get down to it. So that's why he's never been a guy that's been on high on my board. He's talented, no doubt about it, but wasn't something that I saw that. Frank G, I think we're going to end it with this one. Or actually, I'll have 2 more. There's a good question about that too. And Nico is a 2023 quarterback from California. Frank G says, when are we getting a Peyton Bowen game breakdown show? That's actually going to be tomorrow, Frank. We were going to do it this week, but we had to cancel yesterday's show because I had some things I had to get taken care of, but also my voice was pretty shot yesterday. I'm planning on doing that tomorrow. I'm going to have we're going to break down Peyton Bowen, but we're also going to break down a couple other things. So we're going to have a recruiting show probably tomorrow night, Saturday night. So we're going to have that this weekend for sure, Frank. So that's a good question. And thank you for the super chat. And we're definitely going to get to that. I like this question. I want to end with this next question too. Tyler Bengi says, Brian, can you explain what a run pass coordinator does on both offense and defense? It varies from place to place, but generally speaking, so during the week, you put together, you build your game plan on top of itself, right? So you sit down and you kind of watch the film and you look at the personnel that the other team has. You look at what they do schematically, those type of things, and you start putting your game plan together. And you say, okay, here's our base offense, right, as an offense. Here's the things. Hold on. Here are the things we're going to run inside and outside zone every week. We're going to run this pass concept. These are things that we're just our money things to do, right? And so, but how are we going to do it this week? Okay. And what are the things we're going to complement it with? So you kind of go in and you build your game plan. Well, what happens is when you have an offensive coordinator, he's going to be obviously the ultimate decision maker. If you have a pass game and a run game coordinator, and I've been a pass game coordinator at 2 places now, the way it worked for us was, and the way we did it, plus how it should have been done when we combine those 2 things is so, I'm breaking down the film and I'm focusing on, as a pass game coordinator, what are the things they do from a coverage standpoint. Now, not just coverage just in general, but okay, how do they handle 2-by-1 formations, 3-by-1 formations, 2-by-1 formations, 3-by-2 formation, empty formations? How do they shift their coverage based on where the running back is aligned, if he's boundary, if he's field, if he's up, if he's back? Because if a running back is in front of the quarterback, that's going to be treated as more of a pass alignment than if he's behind, where it's more of a run alignment. How do they handle motion? What are the coverage adjustments they make to motion? What are the coverage things that they do to shifts? How do they handle? What's their coverage structure in the situational football? So what's their coverage structure on 3rd down? What is their coverage structure on 3rd and medium, short, long? What's their red zone coverage structure? What's their coming out coverage structure? Meaning if we're backed up, what do they do on 1st down? What's their blitz concepts? Do they trigger blitzes when we go motion? Are they going to trigger blitzes if they see a 3-by-1 formation where the back is to the trips? Some teams will just automatically trigger a weak side blitz in some of those situations. And so I look for all those things and I start to say, hey, here's the things that we do that we can do to take advantage of that. Here's here's some formations we can do. Here's some things we can do. And I take those ideas and I take that package and I narrow it down and I sit and I meet with the offensive coordinator. And we go through what we like. And then we bring in, and then the whole time the run game coordinator is doing the same exact thing with the run game. And he's with the O-line coach if it's not the run game coordinator. But they'll do those things and we'll come together and say, okay, here's what we like run game. Here's what we like pass game. Now, how do we marry them together into one cohesive game plan? And then that's kind of what the main job is. Now, sometimes those coordinators will have opportunities to give input in games. So, for example, the last two places I was a pass game coordinator, I'd have a lot to say with not just the pass concepts that we were going to call going into the game, but when we were in games, we'd get into key situations and I'd say, hey, what do we like here on third down? Then I'd have input on what we're going to call on that next play. Or if I say, hey, look, they're doing this in the game, we need to go to this concept, the coach will do it. And I've told the story before when I was at Duquesne working for Greg Gattuso that, there were times where he would kind of, he'd say some pretty wild stuff during the game, but he always listened to me because he knew that I'd done the work. I knew what I was talking about. And, that I had a good feel for that. So he would trust me in those big moments only if, I was going to him with things I was convicted of. So if you're like offering an opinion on every single play, eventually it's like, you got to know when to speak up, when to say, look, we need to do this. This is where this is going to be there. You've got to be convicted of it. And then it's going to listen to you. So when I did have conviction, say, hey, we need to do this 9 times out of 10, we would go for it. I was in another example when I was at Christopher Newport. We were going to play my alma mater, Salisbury, in the playoff, first round of the playoff. They're undefeated. That was one of those weeks because I played for the coach that was there. I knew that defense. I practiced against it every day. I knew them, like the back of my hand. The offensive coordinator was our head coach, and he gave me a lot more leeway that week to put the game plan together and then to listen to me in the game to call plays because he knew I knew it. So, but it was just building off what my role already was. We won that game by 11, by the way, threw for about 300 yards in the game, just under 300 yards in the game. But that's kind of the role the coordinator does. The offensive coordinator needs to trust them that when these guys say we need to do something, then you go to it because you know that they've put in the work. You've spoken with them, you've talked to them about everything you're doing, and then you can go out and have a say at times in what you're going to do. But ultimately, it's all geared towards building that game plan as a cohesive unit to give to the offensive coordinator. And again, a lot of it is early week stuff. Is I'm breaking down the pass game, you're breaking down the run game, and then we all come together for one cohesive game plan. So I hope that answers that question. Yeah. I hope it. And I'm going to answer one more question because this is out there a lot. And David Solomon says, am I the only one concerned about Harry Hiestand being 5 years removed from coaching and recruiting high school kids? Maybe he could be considered a retread from a coaching standpoint. I don't think so. Again, he's not 5 years removed from coaching high school kids. He's never coached high school kids. He coaches college kids. And as we've expressed before, he worked with the Notre Dame offensive lineman last year. I mean, we broke this story at Irish Breakdown. We didn't break it, but we reported on it. We knew about it. We've hinted about it for 2 years. Harry Hiestand spent the whole summer before the 2020 season working with the Notre Dame offensive lineman. He watched film with him. He gave him pointers. He's helped him. He's been around the game. He hasn't just been sitting on his couch eating Cheetos the last couple of years doing nothing. He's been working. He just hasn't been coaching at a school. So I don't think that is at all a concern of mine. As long as my only concern would be, does he still have the passion for working with young people? Because what can happen is if you don't have a passion for working with young people, you can get real impatient with them and real cranky with them, and your relationship will be soured. David, I think that would be my bigger concern as opposed to the time that you're away from them. And I don't. It's that part of it is not an issue for me. It's more about the passion. If he still has the fire to coach and teach, then he's going to be fine. And I don't think that we've seen this huge generational difference in what kids are or are not since Harry Hiestand has been here. And let's not forget something else. Next year's roster, Josh Lugg, Andrew Kristofic, Zeke Correll, for sure are all guys that Harry Hiestand either coached, he coached Josh Lugg for a year, or recruited. He recruited Zeke Correll and Andrew Kristofic. So he's not that far removed because there's guys on the current roster who he has recruited to Notre Dame. So it's not that far removed from the process. So I think it'll be fine. If Harry Hiestand doesn't succeed in the second go-around at Notre Dame, it'll be for other reasons, not the fact that he hasn't coached in college for 5 years. That's just not a concern of mine. So anyway, well, everybody, I appreciate it. It's been appreciate your patience this week. We'll be back tomorrow. I'll be back. I'm going to try to see who I'm going to get on the show with me tomorrow night. So make sure you are subscribed and hit the notification bell so you know when we're going to go live tomorrow night. We're going to have a recruiting show. We're going to break down some film. We're going to obviously spend some time on Peyton Bowen, going over his commitment. We're going to go over sort of what's next at the safety position, break down some film there. We're going to kind of talk about the class, the 2023 class as a whole. And we're going to start having a few more recruiting shows mixed in here as we go through this, as now that we get into the offseason, recruiting becomes a big part of what our coverage package is going to be. And of course, a big part of what we're going to be reporting on. So I appreciate our being with us. Hit the like button, hit the subscribe button, hit the notification bell. Give us a 5-star review. Sign up for the message boards. We're almost to 1,400 subscribers. Can you believe that? My goal was to be 1,000 by August. I can't believe how much we've grown. We've had some great conversation on the boards. A lot going on now. So, and a lot of back and forth on the boards. It's not everybody on the same page. You don't have to agree with me all the time. We've had some really good back and forth, really good conversation. And of course, we can always continue the things that are discussed here. And the nice part today, for example, is that since I can't talk, I'll be a lot more and be able to engage you a lot more on the message board with answering your questions than I can today in the chat, since I am about to lose my voice. So appreciate everybody. Have an awesome rest of your day. And I will talk to you all again tomorrow. Thank you for being part of the Irish Breakdown podcast.